and welcome to a new episode of How to Build a Theatre, a podcast charting the creation of a new theatre by looking at the wider theatre industry. My name is Edward Macmillan, the Artistic Director of the Bridge Theatre here in Brussels.
Oh, and my name is Phil Wilcox, and I am a singer and freelance musician here in London. That was very energetic, Ed. Oh my goodness, I nearly had to take my headphones out.
Foregrounded, like everything touchwards feels under control at this point. We haven't opened yet. We're starting rehearsals just in 1 week from now, and yeah, it's promising to be a very exciting, very visually interesting event. I think I'm really excited about it.
And you've got the whole team is working together. You have you've got your wonderful director and designer. Can you tell us a little bit about those people?
Yes, well, the whole creative team, actually, they know each other previously, which it's always nice to have people who know each other. So that doesn't always happen. It's actually quite rare for the whole creative team to know each other and to have worked together before. But what that helps is that it means that they can. The communication is more fluid because they already understand each other's thinking, each other's language. I mean, like metaphorically speaking, and it means I feel that they're all on each other's wavelength already, which aids the kind of creation process. I mean, theatre is all about working together and finding a common product in the end, which is the basis of different people's inputs.
And I see it's a show generally in the evening. You've got a couple of matinees by the looks of it, and that it's 75 minutes, no interval. I love a piece of theatre. I mean, I love theatre like the next person, but I love a piece of theatre that's done in one half.
Well, it is the trend, really, at the moment. It's actually rare to go to the theatre, I think. Even to the opera. I've been to the opera, plenty of operas now, which do it in one whack, basically, and don't have an interval. There was this thing, I don't know whether it still exists in London, of wanting all West End shows basically to finish before 10. That was like there, because you want people to be able to go home and have go out and have a drink maybe before they go home, or get home at a reasonable time. I find it as a Brit who is used to pretty across the board start time of 7:30. I sometimes find the start times here a little late, so we actually start at 8:00. Or at least for this show. But I've seen plays here that start at 8:30 and they go on, over 2 hours, and that's already quite a long time in the theatre and a bit late.
Well, you see that as well, working occasionally in hotter countries, sort of south of France, Italy, that sort of stuff. It wouldn't be unusual, certainly in the hotter months over summer, to start a show at maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock even in the evening. And of course, culturally, that might be a little bit more easily acceptable as well, given that there might have been time off during the day at the hottest point, and people are actually just sort of resurfacing at 4, 5, 6 in the evening, and then finishing work and not ready to go out until 10 o'clock. I guess Brussels not quite so late as that, but what is the nightlife like in Brussels? Is it easy to get around after a late finishing show, or?
It's fairly easy to get around, yeah, but I think the start time is kind of crucial because, especially for us, because we are dealing with an international audience, exactly, with all these different perceptions of time, and so it's something which we do hotly debate internally. And then there's also the question of what an 8 o'clock start time actually means. Actually, when does the show start? And that's also a call that we have to make with the front of house team to say, okay, when are we actually starting the show? We, again, perhaps because of my British traditions, like to try and start fairly promptly, but there are also some cultures, again, particularly Southern Europe, where an 8 o'clock start doesn't necessarily mean 8 o'clock start. It may mean 8:15, exactly, etc. So you kind of have to balance these different perceptions of what it means to have an 8 o'clock show.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. 8 o'clock aperitivi for a 9 o'clock start. It sounds pretty
Exactly.
Pretty nice to me, pretty relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed it's certainly in London. It's very standard to start at least 5 minutes late, isn't it? Just to allow people,
Oh yeah.
because I think we know the mentality for the majority. Some people will leave obviously with plenty of time, get there for a drink in the bar. Um, Actually, I think of and of course we've got to consider as well the logistics of getting in. You know, unless because you theatres generally will have 1, 2, 3 aisles, and you might have a bank of seats 12, 13, 14 in a row. And if your seat's 7 in a bank of 1 through 14, you've got to get all the way into the middle of your seats, and you're upsetting Mr. So and So, who might, for access reasons, have picked 1 or 14 to stay in the aisle. And I'm speaking like this because I did it just the other day, and I
Yes.
felt terrible coming in at 7:30 at a 7:30 start and asking this poor chap who really struggled to get up out of his seat for me to get in. But that's
I mean,
tricky, isn't it?
theatre is ultimately about, yes, managing a crowd of people at one time, and that's also something that we have to consider all the time. Yeah, how do you get these people in and out? And one crucial thing about theatre is that also, which is something that we've had to be dealing with whilst looking for different venues, is toilets. Then toilets become suddenly quite a major issue, because you can't just have 1 or 2 for over 100 people. You need a few more in order to get the flow going, and so yeah, suddenly toilets, which you don't really have to think about that much in everyday life, suddenly they're quite crucial.
And it's true, isn't it? Because certainly we think of the Red Velvet theatres, and that's what they tend to be, banks of chairs all crammed together, quite small, a little bit smaller than they probably should be, all facing in one direction towards a raked theatre stage with some boxes, maybe stalls, dress circle, upper circle, balcony, gallery, gods, etc. Actually, if you build a theatre these days, and we've seen plenty of I certainly know plenty of examples of this in the UK. I'm sure you could name them all across Europe as well. Uh, and modern theatre would not be built like that anymore. You need flexible seating. You need just not even just for the access of your punters, the access of the requirements and the comfort of the people coming to watch, but also because theatre itself is less and less constrained by proscenium arches and sticking it on a stage for people in front of us to watch. There's loads of theatre in the round, and in a half round, and all sorts of companies wanting their audience to be seated and experience their work in a different way. And so the best way is actually to have an adaptable space, isn't it? Speaking of which, do you have any news on the physical space of the bridge?
Not really, but we do have a particular lead at the moment, which is interesting, because it would enable us to have some kind of flexible space, and it would be a short term, so a temporary occupation essentially, so a short term lease. Of quite a small size. So we're currently exploring this, and it's in a great location. Obviously, I don't want to say too much right now, but having a small place for a short time would actually enable us to ramp up our activities, because again, the biggest constraint to us doing activities is space all the time, not having the space. So just having a space will enable us to do things, keep building our following, and then because it's a short-term thing, then we can hopefully then graduate to something a little bit bigger in a few years' time. So I'm quite hopeful about this, but let's see.
And that is very heartening to hear, first of all, and possibly quite it's not a bad thing, let's say, for you as the company, as the bridge, which is still light on its feet. You don't have a huge team of people that you need to find office space for. You don't need to find a building with lots of space for prop storage and an archive and all that sort of stuff, and rehearsal space and the rest of it. You can still be pretty light on your feet and take a shorter lease. And at the end of that lease, once you've had that space, probably adaptable space, like we were just saying, for a few months, years, or whatever, then it should be fairly easy for you to up sticks and move if you need to.
Hopefully, yeah, exactly. Although we are already built. Like, I feel every month, no, maybe not every year, we are getting heavier in our footprint in terms of the physical things we accumulate in a good way, definitely. But that I'm referring to old bits of set, old costume, bits of tag. It gradually builds, and we've got our tiny little office space at the moment where things are generally kept, or they're kept, for example, in our basement here, in the building of my apartment.
Do you have an interesting thing in an interesting space? I can think of friends who I've been to their houses in their flat, and I said, "That's an interesting chair you got." Yeah, that was the set of such and such, and we didn't want to get rid of it, so it's here for now, and we'll use it in pretty much every production. I can think of a farmer who, well, a farmer come producer, or at least a small holding holder who come producer who has a one of those shipping containers on his land, and all of the props
Wow.
from their small opera company, for example, go into that shipping container. Do you have an interesting thing in an interesting spot?
We have a lot of wood, I think. No.
Good Lord, you heard it here first. There is a lot of wood.
Which is currently cluttering our office. Yes, lots of planks of wood mostly. I think the most interesting thing is actually the really super ugly carpet that we use for Vincent River, which is wrapped in many plastic bags in my basement, but far away from eyes because it's painful to see.
Well, there you go. So you can't build a bridge without lots of wood.
And on that note, Phil,
Yeah.
I think it might be time to listen in to my conversation that I had with George Brant.
I grew up in the Chicagoland area, and started out really as an actor, and then and was did some writing in college, but again, mostly acting was the focus. And when I graduated college, I wasn't always getting the roles that I wanted, and
I
so
can absolutely relate, by the way. I have
yes,
the same
yes.
experience.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, I could, write the roles that I want. So um, the the first few plays that that I wrote out of undergrad were pretty much for myself, and to showcase my my own acting, and then things kind of went from there. And over time, I kind of accrued a bunch of an acting community, and an ensemble, and then I kind of phased myself out of the acting over time. And then I met my wife, Laura Kepley, who's a great director, and she, I kind of had been directing these plays that I wrote as well at that point. But then she's a much better director than I am, so she kind of assumed that role, and so I kind of kept easing myself more and more into the writing chair, and so and those were mostly comedies when I started out.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but over time, it does seem that definitely more the dramas are outweighing the comedies. Although I would love to do more of that because it definitely puts you in a better mood.
I mean, fascinating that you went from acting into playwriting that way, and
Mhm.
it brought you there. Do you think that? I mean, that must have some influence on how you approach the playwriting kind of process, because you must approach it from a very kind of actor-centric point of view. I don't know.
I think that's true. I mean, I think I really, because of that background, my primary goal is to write great parts for people, and that they'll enjoy playing. That was certainly true and grounded. I think part of the fun of that was to hopefully, write a role that, was really meaty and juicy for somebody, and to get to showcase things that maybe they wouldn't otherwise be asked to do. I think, I mean, a lot of the women who've played this part, they're like, oh, I'm usually the ingenue, or I'm usually, not asked to be this aggressive persona that the pilot is. And Into the Breaches of that play is more of a comedy, a World War II comedy, and in that the men are away at war and the women take over the theater, and they, because they don't want the theater shut down, so they end up doing the Shakespeare Henry the Fourth and Fifth, and again, so they're sword fighting. There's, again, kind of trying to just give roles to people that are fun, and maybe, a lot of women take stage combat, in grad school, but then never get to use it. And I thought that would be, I don't know, fun for them, and it has proven that way. So, and I definitely, I think I have to figure out when I'm writing, I have to figure out a way that I could act the parts that I'm writing. So I think I don't know, that's one screener perhaps, or one, I guess I figure, like, if I can do it, then somebody else can, basically. So that's an extra level of proofing, I suppose, that it gets, that if it doesn't feel natural to me, then I know something's wrong.
I mean, but both Grounded and also Into the Breach are pretty strongly female-led.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that an accident almost, or is that intentional, or how? Yeah, how do you feel about that?
That definitely in these latter years, I think that probably started out with more male leads in my plays, and then over time it has switched over. I mean, I think with Grounded in particular, there was I think a feeling that that we've seen war through the male persona for thousands of years, and we have all these stories about that, and there was something, and I don't know if I was thinking of this consciously, but marrying a female soldier, which is a newer phenomenon. It's probably the wrong word, but with this new technology, seemed like an exciting combination. And I know, at least for myself, and this is perhaps a flaw, but when a war story starts that is guys, it kind of has to justify its reason for being at this point for me. Like, okay, what is this take on war? Because I've seen it a million times, and how is this going to be different? Whereas I think with Grounded, because it is a female Air Force pilot, we're kind of like, oh, this is new, from the start. I think we get on board a little sooner, or at least I do, but obviously I wrote it, but so there's a little bias there. But I think it feels newer, and again, there's this new technology that is its subject matter, and it just feels like a natural pairing.
I mean, a lot of people, when I've passed the script for Grounded round to people, they can't actually believe it's been written by a man. And maybe you must have heard this before, and I wonder, does that come naturally from you, from a leap of like imagination in a way, or do you consult with women a lot? Or how do you create such a strong and three-dimensional female character?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is definitely research. Reading lots of interviews with female pilots, and kind of trying to get into that, headspace. I know one interview, and I'm trying to remember the woman's name, but she was saying that she's not trying to be a guy. She was one of the first pilots that she's trying to be a pilot, and that pilot is basically its own gender in her eyes, and that was really intriguing to me, and kind of one of my thesis statements. I think as I was writing it, this idea that that pilot, being a pilot in itself, is its own gender. Yeah, so definitely getting into the heads of pilots, and I think again, maybe it's again that acting background, where you are, you have to be pretty open as an actor, and you have to, be very empathetic, and you have to figure out how to be somebody else, and I think that plays into it, that again, um, having to feel that I'd be able to play the part. Um, I think, I don't know, opens up one's receptors and one's empathetic feelings. And you try to get inside the skin of whoever you're portraying as best you can. And that probably played into it as well. And then I definitely, while writing the script was showing it to women and, and getting their input. So that was part of it as well, I'd say. Yeah, but I think again, it's just that trying to get inside the head of somebody, um, and kick around in there for a while, and kind of, I don't know, embody that person as best you can.
So you said just a few minutes ago that you paired the new technology, I guess, with the new
Mm-hmm. The new warrior, or right,
yeah, and which is fascinating and totally makes sense. What was your original intention? Maybe that's not quite the right word. Thinking when you were first starting about writing this play, what was the subject matter that was really pulling you forward?
Yeah, I think, I was very curious about drones, when we first started hearing about them. I wrote the first draft of this in 2011, back when it was still, considered a top secret program, and there was not much information out there. But the more and more they kept getting used in combat, the more I was curious, what are these things, and how do they operate? And I guess I'm always searching for subject matter that might be a play, at least subconsciously. But this one I couldn't quite figure out, the way into it, until I started reading about the pilots, and specifically about the PTSD that they were unexpectedly facing. And the whole project was kind of being sold to us in America as, here's the best of all worlds. We're not putting any of our pilots in danger, and these weapons are the most precise that we've ever had, and that all sounded great. But then started to read these articles about the unexpected mental strain this is putting on pilots, so that it's not exactly a fail-safe weapon after all, and indeed that the UAV pilots were experiencing PTSD at the same rate as traditional pilots was a trip, and I needed to know more about that, and was interested in exploring it, and that was probably what opened the door to it, and made it seem like, oh, okay, this is a play, and I didn't know, I mean, I had no idea that the drones could be flown from here in the States overseas. I assumed they were flown from the country they were operating in, and that really blew my mind. And that idea of that kind of disassociation, or and yet connection with something that's thousands of miles away, and the whole idea of combat, and is that even fair if you're thousands of miles away from your target? And then the last thing that probably intrigued me the most was this idea that because they're flown from here in the States, and there's not really a need for barracks, and so this idea that the that these pilots actually could then go home at night. It like was a whole other way of fighting war as well, and that seemed to me a really rich area to explore, this idea that you potentially could have, you know, killed, enemy targets during the day and then gone home to your family. And it seemed like quite a mental challenge, and one that I wanted to look into.
Thank you for laying out those three things. I mean, definitely.
Sure.
The first thing you mentioned of this the psychological impact on the operator themselves. I think that's something that I have never considered ever before, and that was something that really drew me to the play. Because yeah, you just never think about the actual pilot itself. You think about the person who is getting bombed rather than the bomber, and what are they feeling? What are they thinking about it? I think that, I mean, it's also interesting, the play was written over 10 years ago now, and technology has moved on. And I think that I guess these days it's possibly more believable, or it's easier to believe that a drone could be operated from the other side of the world, whereas I think it would have been much more to kind of believe that. I wonder if you see any other differences in either how the technology has moved on, or how the play itself, how that is actually being received because of it. I don't know whether you keep up with the different productions that happen actually.
Yeah. Every once in a while I will be able to see one of them, and it is interesting. It kind of depends on what is going on in the world at that moment. Sometimes different elements of the plays will highlight themselves a little more depending on current events. But yeah, when I wrote it, it almost felt like a science fiction play in a way. And it's interesting that it kind of feels like, as you say, like we've all caught up with it in a way. Like some of the things seem less science fiction-y probably now. As you mentioned a moment ago, I think sometimes there's certainly been some directors who are most drawn to like the surveillance aspects of the play, and not even from a military standpoint, but just this idea that we're being seen. We are, in our day-to-day lives are so surveilled, and I think, and that kind of creepy feeling that you're being watched all the time is one that sometimes can stand out, and in fact has, and that's certainly something that in the past 10 years there's only been more cameras and more of that all around us. I think in every country, sometimes you don't even realize. I don't know, there's been kind of a scandal recently where one of our congresswomen got kicked out of a play, and there's footage of it from inside the theater. So she said, "Oh, I wasn't smoking in the theater," and then they put out this video of her doing so, and you can see the smoke coming out of her mouth, and it's like, oh wow, I didn't realize when I went to a play that I was,
they are watching me.
Yeah, from different angles. So I think the surveillance aspect, again, that's only grown, and then the ubiquity of these drones has certainly become, certainly in the Ukraine war right now, it's been kind of, I mean, I think we're now seeing different kinds of them that aren't piloted in it, even in a way that they are in the play, that they're more these kind of suicide drones almost, that just crash into things and blow up. And then naval drones are out there now, which I didn't know about until recently with the Ukraine war. So, and we've got the little surveillance things that can be like about an insect size, and I mean it's really trippy how much the technology has progressed. But I think that only highlights the concerns of the play. To me at least, it doesn't feel dated in that in that way. It feels like the concerns of the play have only grown, actually, since the time it was out there. And certainly that feeling, that's such a part of it, that can you, well, just in a kind of that work life balance that we all try to achieve. Unfortunately, our pilot is underneath, or undergoing, probably the worst example of how to maintain that. And she's that struggle, I think, is something that we're always going to feel, of how much time can you devote to your family, and when you have a demanding job. And yeah, again, she's in kind of a worst case scenario of that. And how you feel fulfilled, and in what you do, and how much of that is what you do, and how much is your family. And I think there are certain concerns that I think will stick around. And I don't know, like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting, like, if we just stopped using drones tomorrow, I don't know if the play would, I don't know, would it be seen as a period piece? Maybe, but we're definitely not. So it's still, yeah, I don't know if there's much about it that to me feels, when I watch it, that feels, I mean, she mentions, Saddam Hussein, that that's our kind of only, uh, clue as to what time period we're in, or even where we are. So I think those more eternal qualities of it, that she speaks of the desert, and we're in the desert. And I mean, it starts to kind of, I think it's almost operating on a mythic plane as well, with the lack of specifics. So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I think actually because the technology is so much more known about, and it has got
Mhm,
less, as you say, less of a sci-fi quality. I think it's even
mhm,
more relatable, because we're like,
mhm,
this is actually happening somewhere
mhm.
right now, kind of thing, and you
Yeah.
feel the reality of it. I
Yeah, I
think
think when
one
it
thing.
started out, I think, as you're saying, a lot of uh, audiences' mental, absorbing of it was spent saying, "Well, that can't be real, can it?" I think in talking and post-show chats and stuff, when it was starting out, there was a lot of that. It's like, well, they don't actually operate from a trailer, and I'm like, oh yeah, they do. Um, a lot of, as with most of my stuff, I guess the stuff that seems most outlandish or crazy is actually true. And then, yeah, I'm responsible for the boring things.
Yeah. No. I was just going to say also that I think there is, what I'm also interested in is also like this post-COVID looking at how we look at
Mm,
things. I think there's something,
hmm.
very relatable now to us all, that she is staring at the screen 12 hours a day.
Yes,
I
yes,
think
for
that kind
sure.
of,
Yeah, right,
there's
right,
an
right.
added relatability in a way to everything
Hmm.
that is happening, I feel.
Right, right. Now we're all living in this world,
Exactly.
like us right now.
Yeah, right.
Yes, yes.
So you mentioned, and I've seen also on the internet that
Hmm.
there is this process of making Grounded into an opera, which is very
Yes,
exciting.
yes. Yeah.
Fantastic project. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we start rehearsals a week from today.
Oh wow.
Um, so it's been about 10 years in the making. Pretty soon after the play debuted in New York, um, I was contacted by the Met, and they had interest in possibly turning it into an opera. And then yeah, and then there was a little matchmaking period, and Janine Titsori and I, where we met and had dinner a few times, and chatted about it, and she decided she wanted to take it on. So we took it from there. And yeah, so it's been a long time in the making. I think, if there had been no pandemic, if there, some other things, it probably would have not been such a long undertaking. And we would have, actually, we did, Janine and I did, speaking of the computer. We're doing a lot of talking like this over Zoom, and a lot of the time I think I even had a plane ticket, to go the next week to New York, to kind of sit down and really hammer out some of these points in the libretto and such. And instead, unfortunately, I stayed at home and we did it over Zoom. So, but it all felt very appropriate with the subject matter. So, but so it was quite a challenge to kind of expand this so much from what is a one-person play into a very big canvas opera, and we spent a lot of time just kind of in the Met's space and staring at this empty stage and figuring out how to fill it. We even had one of the actresses who played the part before. She happily donated her time and read about 20 minutes of the play from the Met stage. Janine really wanted to hear it and hear what it sounded like in that space and what it looked like for one person to be up there. That was very helpful. And also discovered how good the acoustics are at the Met, because we were, getting the back and I could understand every word. And we just kind of dreamed big, and it's definitely a very choral piece. So I don't want to give anything away, but it definitely, the focus, the challenge was to hold the focus on, it's definitely her story, and trying to figure out how to maintain that focus while at the same time, you can only ask so much vocally of one person. So figuring out how to give her at least some breaks within this sprawling piece. But it'll be really exciting. We haven't heard a note sung by the actual singers who are taking it on. We've had a workshop, but it wasn't actually with the singers who are performing it. So it's going to be,
you get to hear them first.
Something. I get to hear them. I think that'll be next Wednesday, most specifically. Yes. I think the chorus has been rehearsing before we even get there. They've been going for a few weeks now, which is kind of crazy. And I believe the principal singers have been working with their vocal coaches with the music for, weeks and months. So it's very different than a play. Like, everybody shows up very prepared and very rehearsed.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. This is my first libretto and my first opera experience behind the scenes. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how this all works.
It is fascinating,
Mm-hmm.
having worked in both, to see the difference
between yes.
opera, which is such a massive machine and very regimented,
yes.
and everyone has their place.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, and the timeline for this?
We start rehearsals next week, and then it opens on the 28th of October.
Fantastic.
Is the first performance. So, so it feels very soon now. But I went from, when is this going to happen to, oh my God, this is happening. So, we'll get all our ducks in a row soon enough.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting. You've kind of teased a little bit, and I'm quite intrigued, actually.
Yes.
I will be avidly watching for the press to see how it is, and to see any clips and things that come out, because I'm really intrigued by this. Very much so.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and
of course,
good luck with the opera. I hope.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thank you for your time. Like, this was
of
great.
course.
I mean, maybe
it was my pleasure.
Last words that you want to say?
I don't think so. That just thanks you all to putting this production on. I believe you are the 25th country.
All right.
So you have a special place in my heart for hitting 25. And I actually first heard about the production. 2 people contacted me who saw the audition notice. I think they're both in England. A couple of my British friends. So I have heard about it from the grapevine there. So very excited about it, and